What if your child went on a trip and never came back? For 12 families, that nightmare was real. It was the summer of 1999, a year that should have been remembered for graduation parties, long nights under the stars, and promises of a bright future. In a small, quiet town tucked between rolling hills and dense pine forests, a group of 12 teenagers boarded a bus for what was supposed to be the highlight of their school break, a 3-day camping trip near Silver Lake. The air was warm, the sun bright, and the chatter of excited voices filled the bus as it rumbled down the winding roads. Teachers waved from the school parking lot. Parents smiled through tearful eyes, and no one could have imagined that this would be the last time they saw their children. Hours later, as dusk settled and the shadows of the forest grew long, the bus never arrived at its destination. The camp counselors waiting at Silver Lake stood puzzled. The campfire was lit, tents were prepared, but the bus, and the children on it, never showed up. At first, authorities assumed a simple detour or mechanical failure. But when night turned into dawn and no word came from the driver, panic swept through the town. Parents flooded the police station begging for answers, holding on to hope that maybe their children were simply lost. But as the days turned into weeks, hope turned into despair. The bus had vanished. The teenagers had vanished. And not a single trace was left behind. Search teams scoured the woods, helicopters circled above, divers combed the waters of Silver Lake. Yet the forest remained silent, giving up no clues. Not even tire marks, not a single backpack, not even a shoe. It was as if the entire vehicle had been swallowed by the earth. The case made national headlines. News reporters stood at the edge of the forest, broadcasting live updates. The town, once forgotten by the rest of the world, became the center of a mystery that gripped the nation. Theories spread like wildfire. A runaway driver, a hidden cult, even whispers of something supernatural lurking in the woods. But none of the theories explained the most chilling fact. 12 teenagers, full of life and dreams, had simply ceased to exist. The years passed, and with them, the world moved on. The headlines faded, the news vans left, and eventually, only the grieving families remained. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, they gathered in the town square, holding candles and photographs, whispering prayers for their children who never came home. By 2024, 25 years had gone by. Most of the parents were older, their faces lined with the weight of sorrow and unanswered questions. The case was considered cold, buried in dusty police files, a tragedy locked away in the past. That is, until a discovery shook the town once again. Deep in the attic of an old house on the edge of the forest, a construction worker stumbled upon a locked metal box while clearing out debris. It was small, rusted, and heavy. Its surface was scratched, but one word was still visible, etched crudely into the lid. Return. The worker, unsure of what he had found, handed it to the authorities. Within hours, the quiet town was buzzing with rumors. Could this box be connected to the missing teenagers? Was this the clue they had been waiting for after a quarter of a century? Inside the police station, officers placed the box on the table. The room was silent, every eye fixed on the object that seemed to radiate secrets. The lock was old, but still intact. A decision was made. The box would be opened the following morning in the presence of investigators, journalists, and surviving family members. For the first time in 25 years, there was a sense of anticipation and fear. No one knew what was inside, but everyone understood one thing. This box could either reopen wounds or finally reveal the truth about the night 12 teenagers vanished. The morning the box was set to be opened, the town gathered like it hadn't in decades. Reporters lined the courthouse steps, cameras pointed toward the entrance. Survivors of the tragedy, Mothers, fathers, siblings who had grown into adults without their brothers or sisters all stood in silence, waiting for answers they feared might never come. Detective Harold Collins, now gray-haired and nearing retirement, was called back to oversee the process. He had been a young officer when the teenagers vanished, and the case had haunted him his entire career. As he entered the room, he placed a trembling hand on the box, his eyes narrowing as if staring into the abyss of 25 years of unanswered questions. The lock was broken with a single strike. A heavy silence fell across the room as the lid creaked open. Inside, neatly stacked, were 12 identical notebooks. Each one was bound in dark leather, the names of the missing teenagers etched faintly on the covers. Gasps echoed. Some parents sobbed. The notebooks were real, tangible, and chilling. Detective Collins carefully lifted the first one. The handwriting inside was messy, frantic, and dated precisely to the night of the disappearance. June 14th, 1999. We never made it to the camp. The bus turned down a road none of us recognized. The driver won't answer us. The woods are darker than they should be. Something's wrong. A shiver went through the room. Collins flipped further. It's been hours. The bus keeps moving, but none of us know where. The windows show nothing but trees, endless trees. Some kids think we're going in circles. Others think we're going deeper. I can't tell anymore. The next entry was smeared, as if written in panic. We stopped. The driver left. He didn't say a word. He just walked into the woods. We can't see him anymore. The families clutched one another. This wasn't just evidence. This was their children's final words. Collins opened another notebook. There are voices in the forest, not the drivers, something else. It's like whispers, but none of us can understand them. One of the younger kids swears the trees are moving. I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it. Each notebook seemed to document the same timeline, but from different perspectives. 12 voices trapped in a nightmare, each describing details that grew more disturbing with every page. We found an old cabin. The windows are shattered. There's writing on the walls, symbols none of us have seen before. We're staying here tonight because we have no choice. The whispers are louder. Sarah says she saw someone outside, not the driver, someone else. But when we looked, no one was there. We're running out of food. The forest feels alive. Every night the shadows grow closer. I don't think we'll get out. The notebooks ended abruptly. No farewells, no explanations, just pages stained with dirt, and something darker that looked eerily like dried blood. When Collins closed the final notebook, the room was ice cold. Mothers sobbed into their hands. Fathers clenched their fists in silence. For the first time, they had pieces of the puzzle, but no answers. Who was the driver? Why did he take that road? And who, or what, were the teenagers describing in those final pages? Theories reignited instantly. Some said it was a criminal conspiracy, that the driver had been working with someone. Others whispered about cults and rituals in the woods. And then there were those who insisted the forest itself was responsible. But the most haunting detail came from one final discovery. Beneath the notebooks, hidden in the bottom of the box, was a map. It was hand-drawn, crude, and shaky. A red X marked a spot deep in the forest, far beyond where search parties had ever gone. Collins spread the map across the table. For the first time in decades, they had a lead, and within hours, a new search team was formed. Veteran officers, journalists, and even some of the family members insisted on going. Armed with flashlights, shovels, and an uneasy sense of hope, they set out toward the red X. The forest welcomed them with silence. The forest was different now. It wasn't the same woodland people had picnicked in or hiked through years before. To those who entered with the map in hand, every tree felt taller, every shadow darker, every sound heavier. The deeper they went, the more it felt as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Detective Collins led the group, the map clutched tightly in his hands. Behind him walked officers with flashlights sweeping across the undergrowth. Parents trailed near the back, carrying old photographs of their children as though the faces might guide them. Journalists whispered into recorders, narrating what felt like the unfolding of a legend. Hours passed. Cell phone signals vanished. The group pressed on, following the shaky lines of the hand-drawn map. Every so often, Collins would stop, kneel, and compare the trees, the clearings, the bends in the path. Each time he rose, his face was paler. By sunset, they reached a clearing. At its center stood something no one had expected, the rusted remains of a bus. Gasps echoed across the clearing. Flashlights darted to the sides, illuminating shattered windows, flat tires, and a door hanging half open. The yellow paint was chipped away, vines crawling across the metal like skeletal fingers. But the most chilling part was the faint outline of numbers on the side, the exact school bus the teenagers had boarded in 1999. The parents rushed forward, trembling, touching the cold metal as if it might still carry the warmth of their children. Cameras clicked rapidly. Collins raised a hand, urging everyone back, but even he struggled to mask his unease. Inside, the bus was hollow. Dust and dirt covered the floor. Seats were torn apart, clawed open as if by desperate hands. On one seat, faintly scratched into the leather, was a message. "Don't follow him." Collins whispered the words aloud, and silence fell over the clearing. Who was him? The driver? Or someone else? Further back, another seat bore a second message, this one carved deeply as if by a trembling hand. "They're not alone." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Flashlights jittered as hands shook. A mother sobbed quietly, pressing her face against the cracked glass window. Then one of the officers shouted. Near the back of the bus, under a pile of rotted wood, they uncovered something even more disturbing. A small box, identical to the one found in the attic. This one was already open, its contents scattered. Inside were fragments of torn notebook pages, written in the same frantic handwriting as before. One page read, "He keeps leading us deeper. We don't know why we're following anymore. Some of us think he's not the driver we started with." His eyes look different now. "Wrong." Another page, nearly illegible, contained only one phrase repeated over and over. "The forest wants us." The word sent a shiver down every spine. Night fell quickly in the clearing, the forest swallowing the last light of day. Collins insisted they press on. The map's red X lay even further ahead. But as they prepared to leave, one of the parents pointed to the ground. Footprints, dozens of them. Small, narrow, like those of teenagers. But they were fresh. No one spoke. No one dared suggest the impossible. But the meaning hung heavy in the air. With renewed urgency, the group followed the trail. The footprints led them deeper into the woods, weaving between twisted trees that seemed to lean closer the further they went. The forest grew denser, darker, the air colder. Even the sounds of birds and insects had faded, leaving only the crunch of footsteps. After what felt like hours, they reached the place marked on the map. The red X wasn't a random spot. It marked the entrance to a stone structure half buried in the earth. Moss clung to its walls, roots twisted around its edges. The doorway yawned open, black and silent, like a mouth waiting to swallow whoever dared to step inside. Above the entrance, faint symbols had been carved into the stone. They matched the drawings the teenagers had described in their notebooks, strange, spiraling markings that seemed to pulse when the flashlights touched them. Collins froze. His voice cracked as he whispered, This wasn't on any map of the forest. This shouldn't be here. The parents clutched each other. The journalists hesitated, their hands trembling over their cameras. And still, the footprints continued, straight into the darkness of the stone structure. With no other choice, the group stepped forward. And as the last person crossed the threshold, the forest behind them fell completely silent. The air inside the stone structure was suffocating. Every breath felt heavy, laced with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like rust or blood. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating narrow corridors etched with the same spiraling symbols. The walls seemed to close in the deeper they went, as though the structure itself resented their presence. Detective Collins led carefully, his voice low. "Stay close. No one splits up." Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, each sound lingering longer than it should. Parents clutched their candles, hands trembling. The group pressed forward until the narrow tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. At the center of the chamber stood a circle of 12 wooden chairs. Each chair had a name carved into the backrest, the names of the missing teenagers. Gasps filled the chamber. A mother dropped to her knees, sobbing. A father shouted their child's name into the silence, his voice cracking. But the room did not answer. Collins examined one of the chairs. The wood was old, splintering, but the carvings were fresh, as if someone had made them recently. Then he noticed something else. Resting on each seat was an object, a shoe, a necklace, a torn piece of fabric, all belongings the families instantly recognized, relics of their lost children. Suddenly, one of the officers stiffened. His flashlight shook wildly as he pointed toward the far wall. There, scratched into the stone, were frantic words. "We never left." The chamber fell into chaos. Parents screamed. Journalists snapped photos with trembling hands. Collins barked orders to stay calm, but his own voice betrayed fear. Then, the sound began. At first it was faint, a whisper, like wind slipping through cracks, but it grew louder, swelling into a chorus of overlapping voices. The group froze, realizing the whispers weren't coming from the walls or the ceiling. They were coming from the chairs. 12 voices. Young voices. Desperate, layered on top of one another. Some cried for help, others begged to be set free. One repeated over and over, "He's still here!" Collins raised his flashlight toward the far end of the chamber. And there, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure. Tall. Motionless. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The beam of light caught its face, or what was left of one. The features were warped, sunken, and wrong. But the uniform it wore, the tattered remains of a bus driver's jacket, left no doubt. The driver. He did not move, did not speak. But the voices grew louder, as if the children were trapped within him, their cries spilling out through his hollow frame. Collins shouted for everyone to get back, but before anyone could react, the figure took a single step forward. The chamber shook violently, dust raining down from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Panic erupted. Parents scrambled toward the exit. Officers drew their weapons. Journalists dropped their equipment in terror. But as they turned to flee, they found the doorway had vanished. The stone walls had sealed shut. The whispers turned to screams. The chairs rattled violently, the objects atop them clattering to the ground. One by one, the candles extinguished, plunging the chamber into near darkness. Only the flashlights remained, beams darting wildly. Collins, his voice breaking, shouted, "They're trapped! The children are still here!" And then, silence. Every sound ceased. The chamber froze in stillness. When the flashlights steadied, the figure was gone. The chairs were empty, and the belongings had disappeared. The group stumbled back, disoriented, terrified. Somehow the doorway had reappeared. They fled the chamber, running through the tunnels, bursting back into the forest, gasping for air. When they finally emerged, dawn was breaking. Birds chirped. The forest was alive again, as if nothing had happened. But the box of notebooks, the map, the second box found on the bus, all were gone. Authorities filed a report, but it was incoherent, fragmented. Some swore they had seen the children's faces in the shadows. Others insisted the driver was no longer human, that something in the forest had claimed him. Collins, now pale and hollow-eyed, refused to speak of what he had seen. The case was once again closed, but not solved. And in the years that followed, hikers who wandered too far into the forest reported strange encounters. The sound of children laughing in the distance, faint whispers carried on the wind, and sometimes the sight of a yellow school bus, rusting quietly between the trees, only to vanish when approached. The town returned to silence. The families carried their grief. But the truth remained buried in the woods, locked away in that underground chamber where 12 chairs still wait. And though no one dares return, one question lingers, haunting all who hear the story. If the children never left, where are they now?